King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King, right now on States and Kingdoms. Welcome back to States and Kingdoms. Today we're talking about our very first King Crimson album, In the Court of the Crimson King.
An observation. We put off doing this for a while because, we were trying to go through every album of certain groups, and we decided not to do that and instead to shake it up a bit. So
bounce around.
Then there's really no reason not to do King Crimson because, going through all of them is a little daunting.
For whatever reason, we had thought it would be fun to do King Crimson all in order, just like in one go.
Yeah, that would be difficult.
Yeah, so we're not holding back anymore. We're just gonna throw them in whenever we want to.
You told a story.
Did I?
Once about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and hearing them on the radio.
Yes.
And that you really liked it. You got the album, Brain Salad Surgery.
Yes.
It was. From the library.
I got it from the library. Poor.
The East Meadow Library.
Yes. Do you want to track us down?
You can't track us down from that.
We're not there anymore.
Anyway, we are actually in the library right now.
Don't tell them.
Anyway, you loved that, and then you actually initially thought it was The Who.
All right, well now I sound like an idiot.
It's a little embarrassing, but it was at least a couple months ago. You loved that album, but you wound up not listening to any more ELP.
Yeah, right then and
years.
there. Yeah, when I was a small child, for some reason I didn't seek out the rest of their albums, and for that
I'm boring myself with this story.
For that, I'm sorry.
Anyway, I have a similar story. I have a poem about King Crimson.
Yeah, it's a Greg Lake issue.
I don't know what it is. I got this probably when I was like 16 or so. I'm sure I downloaded it.
I'm sure you stole it, yeah.
And I loved it. I really did. I really loved it. It was to me. I was listening. I'd listened to a lot of Cream and things like that, as well as starting to listen to like the Velvet Underground. It seemed like the next step after Cream to me at the time. Yeah. It seemed like that that next step, and incorporating things that that I was enjoying in the first two Velvet Underground albums, and other things too. But for some reason, I didn't listen to anything else after this first album for years.
Yeah,
I have no idea why.
I think partly for me with King Crimson, it never felt like I could really grasp the band in a way. The lineup changed.
Well,
their sound changed. It wasn't like Robert Fripp isn't like the image of the band. You don't think like here's Robert Fripp and he's like the main guy and you see him and he's here and then he's there and you can like just follow it. I don't know. It just like
he's the guy who looks like a school teacher sitting down.
He's in the back
in the corner. Yeah. But no, it's true.
I don't know. That's not like a hindrance to listening to something,
because
but it made it a little bit more difficult to understand. You really had to go and get it.
After the next record, I mean, there's no more Greg Lake. And then, obviously, there are lineup shifts, and then the first iteration of the band ends, and then the second one begins, and it sounds very different.
It's always disorienting when the singer changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially when, it's Greg Lake.
Yeah.
A phenomenal singer. And
he was 12 when they made this album.
His singing on this is amazing. It's an incredible performance.
And that's how we started listening to King Crimson.
And stopped. And it really wasn't until, I don't even know when, like probably 15 years later that I listened to something else. It's bizarre. So this was before, I hadn't listened to, any of the other,
Prog.
Well, any of the other, even like Black Sabbath, really.
Yeah.
I hadn't listened to all of Led Zeppelin's albums. I hadn't, this was really early when I heard this. Mm-hmm. I think inarguably this is one of the greatest debuts. I mean, not too many bands have a first album this good.
No, it's amazing.
I'm not even going to bother trying to think of one.
Obviously the Beatles. They're the answer to everything. I'm looking at this a lot.
You're gonna get us. You're gonna get people angry at us.
Come on.
Burt Law impression. Put 'em up.
That's for the kids.
Yeah.
It's also so incredibly influential. I mean, I don't even know the full scope of who was influenced by this, but you hear bits of it in so many other bands.
Well, that's the thing. We were talking about that the other day. I hear King Crimson popping up in modern bands more than I hear Yes or Genesis.
I agree.
In a very wide array of groups as well. I mean, it's, you know, you hear Robert Fripp's approach, you know, in bands, even like a band like, you know, like in a band like Slint, or even, you know, some of the late 70s groups like Mission of Burma, or, you know, and then of course on other groups that would be closer, you know, people would consider in a similar genre. There's, I mean, no question that bands that are considered like math rock have, you know, this.
Oh, it's all over.
And you mentioned what was the band?
I mentioned Gorillaz.
Oh yes, Gorillaz, of course.
I thought Moonchild, and I, you know, obviously I didn't make this connection ages ago, but when I listened to it again more recently, I was like, well, this sounds like an exact Gorillaz song. There's a real Damon Albarn thing that I didn't really pick up on before. So I think this had to have been something that, that he knew. And Grizzly Bear, which is a band that I didn't listen to a ton, but, you know, there's a couple of songs that
there's a lot.
Close. There's a lot. There's so many more. I mean, these are just things that I felt like a really strong familiarity
That's interesting
with.
because, you know, a lot of the time, with Genesis or maybe a couple of the other, you know, more progressive whatever bands, you get people like Dream Theater or Marillion or, you know,
Flaming Lips.
No, well, to some extent, to some extent, but they do music very similar. Whereas with King Crimson, the influence is really, really wide. It doesn't mean that any of those bands actually will sound like King Crimson or do something exactly like King Crimson. I'm not even sure exactly what that means. But, you know, the thing is, even on this album, you hear that, those touches, that style that they have, the approach that they have, that is going to just kind of spread out.
Yeah. It's really interesting because this album just has this really clear, like, feeling and tone of just, like, current. You know, it's very, I think, like, if you put this on for someone who didn't know it, it'd be very hard for them to place when this came out. You know, all the songs on the album are fairly distinct from each other. They're pretty different.
Yeah, they have different.
But all of them have this real, like modern feeling for me.
I think it's actually a kind of a timelessness. There are things on this album that are like an old broadside, and then there are things that are very jazzy and like current jazz, almost, you know, the mid 60s, you know, I'm not gonna say free jazz, but more of that kind of you know, jazziness. And then there's a folky kind of approach to the lyric, to the melody even, you know, and to the overall kind of feel. It has like a very old and very new kind of feel to it, and it's pretty unique.
In
that respect. You know, I think it doesn't kind of rub your face in it, but you just feel it.
Yeah,
you know, it's definitely there. Mm-hmm. Also, its influence on their contemporaries. I mean, it's hard. It's actually almost harder to pin that down, but must have had a pretty massive, and because this was a successful album.
Yeah.
You know, in both countries, this was a successful album. And
there's only two.
The only country, both countries. You know, the United States and America. Yeah. No, that's not funny. No, it just came up recently when we were talking about the Yes album. That Yes, you know, had felt, being on the same label, felt some pressure because their first two records really didn't do anything, and
Right.
they really needed to find themselves and put something out, and that doesn't mean that they're influenced by the music so much, but I think they must have been.
They must have been.
The approach,
the approach.
Yeah, I
and,
mean, there's no compromise on this record.
No, of course.
With such a short amount of tracks, there is great variety. There is, of course, great variety even in individual songs.
Yes, because they have very dynamic, lots of changes, Max.
21st Century Schizoid Band is one of the,
Classic.
A great hard rocking song really that has some real kind of tricks up its sleeve.
I love Greg's vocal. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
His voice is just so easy to listen to. And such movement in that song, and really.
I'll tell you, on Moonchild as well, Robert Fripp's guitar playing is so fascinating. He's not, because he's always like fundamental, and he's not overdoing anything. It's
so
just
restrained.
letting because to me, King Crimson, it's all about like timbre, the quality of the sound, and you get that in the middle of Moonchild. There are a couple of points on this album in Moonchild and in the Court of the Crimson King where it's almost like is it on? It really gets so quiet, and you really focus on just the instruments and the sound of it, not so much not so much the performance or the expressiveness of it, if you know what I mean, but really just the sounds. Like it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And that's real King Crimson quality that, special to them.
Yeah, there's a real like elegance in the music where it's just only what is needed. There's nothing extra, and within the framework that they're using, there's a lot going on, but it's all kind of like very contained.
And there is like
especially on Moonchild.
There is a synthesis of different styles, but again, it's seamless, and there's still a lot to learn from this album for musicians. It's really interesting, and that goes for a ton of other albums, of course.
Yeah.
But this one has been mined pretty hard.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of fascinating stuff here.
I always hear something new when I listen to it. Epitaph has such a tone, obviously is solemn, and that really follows the whole song. Great singing. And then in the Court of the Crimson King has such a dramatic, powerful, build up, and so many changes. I love when like the music falls away and it comes back in, and like the tempo shifts, and it's really
the
a lot going on.
Ian McDonald is incredible. I wanted to do something about that when he passed away, but we didn't.
Yeah.
But the mellotron on this is extraordinary, and
it's such a great melody. Anyway, just such a good
melody.
In
the Court of the Crimson King, yes, it is, and it is a very solemn album. There's no question.
Yeah, that kind of runs throughout, I feel.
Yeah. As usual, we're gonna do some more King Crimson records, and when we do the first,
we'll stretch out more into the songs as we talk about them more. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let us know what you think of this album in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.